Welcome to another episode of Builders, Budgets, and Beers. And today was a doozy with our good friend Will King over at High Cotton Homes. I say this is a doozy, and I feel like I might have said this already on intros, but the entire crux of this episode is how to make money in construction. We talk about pre-construction agreements. We talk about picking the right customer. We talk about the difference in markup and margin, which you should absolutely know. We talk about huge losses and burns that Will had come across just from simple practices that he didn't follow. And Will's an absolute open book. So go ahead, jump in, let's get to it, and learn a little bit about how to make money in construction. Thanks so much for jumping on, dude.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We had some nice warm chatter here. We just said, damn, we got to just hit record and get this thing running. For the listeners, we'll go ahead and jump in. Give the listeners a little bit of an idea of who you are and High Cotton.
All right. Yeah. So Will King, like you said, High Cotton Homes is our company. We are a design build, custom home building company here in Florence, Alabama, which nobody knows where that is hardly. So it's Northwest Alabama. We're almost in Tennessee. We're almost in Mississippi.
Okay.
Everybody always thinks we're on the coast for some reason. It's kind of funny. The complete opposite end of the state.
Isn't that Gulf Shores?
Yeah. So there's a city across the river called Muscle Shoals, which is like famous for the swampers. And it's actually where I went to high school. But when people hear that, they just automatically assume you're at the beach.
Yeah.
So we are, I started the company in 2016. So we're coming up on 10 years to celebrate of 10 years of survival, growth, celebration. I don't know what we're going to call it yet.
Above. Business ownership. Yeah. But
we are just mainly focused on custom building, man. We don't do any, we don't really do any spec building at all. I have a little bit of a rental business going on the side, but that's the pride of our company. Our bread and butter is just custom home building. So we're just doing more and more parts of it. So
customer experience and beautiful product.
Yeah.
Will King over at High Cotton, everybody. That was the episode. Thanks for jumping in.
Yep. We'll see you next year.
Yeah, exactly. No, dude, I love it. I mean, Will, A, you've been a great customer of ours, but B, like you are who we built this product for.
Awesome.
I think, even just kind of piggybacking on our conversation before we hit record, we were talking about the builders that they build a product very similar to yours, sometimes bigger, better, more passive, more whatever, right? Like it's always a contest in construction. But we were just kind of discussing like the challenges if you could build this killer product, but still really not have a strong pulse or really even a clue on what you're making from a financial standpoint. I think just like generally, like what's your take? Like, how do you get into a position to build that type of product and not know your numbers?
Yeah. I mean, so I guess I can just tell a little bit of the story there. I mean, that's really I was a fireman for 10 years and kind of later in my fire career, I started building houses. We had been doing some like flip houses and we had like some more rental property and then decided that, we wanted to take it, I guess all in, right. And be doing this. Well, I remember, man, like my first child was born and we had this house we were framing and this dude was wearing me out about like what kind of house wrap I wanted. Right. And I said, man, I don't know. It's just whatever they bring out to the yard or to the job site. It's just house wrap. And he sent me this article from a dude named Matt Reisinger. And I was like, well, that's awesome. Who's this guy? And so, but then I realized I didn't know a lot of things. Right. Sure. And so I started going down a rabbit hole, man, of just hours and hours and days of reading about perm ratings and weather barriers and how to air seal. And then I really realized that we had this big need for like good building science, good construction in my area. So that was like my passion. Right. So then for the next, let's say 5 years, like that was my focus. Like I just wanted to build it better. Right. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to make it more airtight, more watertight. Crazy design stuff. I loved it and I still love it. Like it's still a passion of mine. But to your point, I was really just focused on that. I mean, I was kind of just trusting my office and trusting our process. And even though they were doing what I think was a really good job with how I'd set them up, like it, I've started to realize years into it, like, okay, I'm building a cool product, but like, I don't think we're even making money, you know?
Dude,
And so
how does
it's
that
like,
set? How did like
yeah,
when that feeling hits you, what is that like?
yeah, it sucks. I mean, because you're like, man, I've been not sleeping. I've been grinding and grinding and grinding to try to get all these projects done and you know, make everybody happy and get employees set up. And then it's like at the end of the day, you're like looking at a P&L statement. You're like, what? Like, how did
Dude,
we lose money? Like we're crushing it out there. And then, you know, it just, I wasn't paying attention, man. I didn't understand a lot of the things. And so, you know, what really flipped for me, I got in, of course, you can see it on my shirt today, but I'm in the Southern Living Custom Builder Program. And
love it.
man, it's been life changing for me. It's
What
kind
is
of
it?
so it's
What is it?
similar to like the NAHB where you've got like Builder 20 groups, you know.
Sure.
So, well, okay, let me back up because Southern Living's like obviously the brand, right? The magazine, everybody knows Southern Living. It's
Yep.
obviously a very famous brand and one of the most popular, if not the biggest magazine in the country.
Love it.
Um, but they put together a custom builder program. They have like this huge website for house plans, and there's about 80 builders, 85 builders. And so you claim your territory, you apply, they interview you, and then you know, hopefully you qualify to join. And then
Sure.
you're basically just a network, right? So then we share a lot of things. And inside that, we've got a Builder 10 group. And that's where I really started. You know, I got talked into that. So I wasn't even going to join it. And then I had basically this phone call with our Tom, the guy who puts these Builder 10 groups together, and they finally
Yeah.
talked me into joining. And then they're like, all right, we're gonna have a first meeting, we're gonna share financials, you're up. And like I was embarrassed. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I can go toe to toe with these guys on air sealing and talking about all that, but I don't have a freaking clue how they came
Dude.
up with 13% net income should be a goal for your company. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't even
Well,
know what you're talking about. And so that's when I was started asking questions, and I'm like, oh, okay, we got to get serious. So,
got to get serious. Okay, so like you laid
yeah,
the foundation with the building science, which I think is justifiable. I mean, if you're building a product like a house and a very high end product at that, building science should be pretty high on the
absolutely,
priority
yeah,
list. But I think it kind of takes those vulnerable moments, those accountability checks
yep,
of kind of opening your eyes to like this isn't status quo. Like
yep.
you need, what was it? You said 13% is what you should be
Yeah,
going
yeah,
for.
that was the number that we were all talking about, and I'm like, I don't even. Yeah, again, I'm like, what? Because I
So
think we
let's
were
break
like,
it down because there's got to be listeners out there. There's got
yeah,
to be listeners out there that are like thinking the same thing.
mm-hmm.
Like what is the 13% that you're talking about? Where were you at when that conversation was brought
Yeah,
up? How'd you get out of it? Let's thread on
yeah.
that.
Well, what was funny is that what we thought we were at was more like 15 or 16% based off how we were doing our statements.
Okay.
But then we realized what we were calling, you know, above or below the line. We were kind of jacked up on that. And so then when
Okay.
we really recalculated and got input from my group, we were more about like 6 to 7%.
Ooh,
So we were
half of
performing
where you
about
needed to
half of
be.
where we needed to be.
Yeah.
And so that sucked, you know. Of course, you know, there's good years, there's bad years. Everybody has ups and downs, a work in progress. But yeah, that was what you know. But you know, I also had to remind myself that like, okay, at that point we were like a 5-year, 6-year-old company,
Yeah.
okay, and we had managed to get up to about $7 or $8 million a year in revenue, and
Okay.
then we had 10 employees at the time. I mean, so really, I wasn't as bad as I thought I was, but I was embarrassed. Like I don't like not winning. Let's just be
Of
honest,
course.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, you got
Yeah.
to
Of
win if you're
course.
going to play ball.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean that's when I guess my attention got flipped, and then we started. You know, Madison, who works in my office, she's our in-house accountant controller
Mhm.
now. We started focusing more on meeting. I wasn't even asking for P&Ls. You know, I wasn't even like, hey, let's meet quarterly, let's meet monthly. Like I was just like, hey, we good? You good? All right, let's go. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how we
You
were
wanted to get out and
operating.
focus on building science. You
Yeah,
didn't
sell
care.
houses. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
so, and I will say, like, just to clarify, but it's been to go. Like, I do think it's a hard line to say like which one you should focus on first. I mean, really, perfect world, you focus on both, but I am really proud that we started off focusing on just building a good house because I don't want to be the builder ever who's just focused on money and not building a good house. Because
Totally.
without the reputation and without people like, around here now, it's like when there's like, oh, that's a high cotton house. Like, oh, like, and that's exactly where I want it to be.
Totally.
Whereas there's other contractors that, like, if they say, oh, that guy built it, everybody's like, ooh, like, stay away from that one.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be that guy. I'm glad we focused on that. But yeah, that group really made me start paying attention to, an actual P&L and looking at, hey, like, why are we paying so much in all these subscriptions? Like, that's one that comes to mind. Like, stuff that we had canceled, stuff that was running away from us, like QuickBooks fees that I didn't even know we were paying that, like, didn't make any sense. There's like horrible story attached to that one. Yeah. And so there's just, like, before you know it, like, you're just paying out more and more things like subscriptions to softwares that you thought you canceled, and maybe you didn't. And then, whether it's not even just keeping up with your fuel, just tracking your fuel. Like, I mean, I wasn't paying attention, man. Like, I just, anyway, so
no, you're good.
That was a big one too.
Wait, say that again.
And maintenance, like vehicle maintenance. I didn't realize how bad we were getting crushed on taking trucks to the shop.
Dude, so I want to backtrack this because you had did you call it a 13% net income, like a net profit? Is that what you called it?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I hear it all the time, have been for years, builders saying I'm a cost plus 20.
Yeah.
Right. That 20% is like, that's what we mark everything up. And that's what builders think is the take home.
Oh yeah.
And then they always get juiced and they sleep on like the overhead, the operating costs, the maintenance, all the stuff that you don't think about. And that's typically what I hear is what gets builders heavy. And that's when they start clearing that 4, 5, 6% net profit.
Yeah.
And they're just like stuck there like, how is this possible? We're marking everything up 20%. We're building beautiful homes, huge top line. Like, we should be crushing, but they don't. So can you get specific on yours? If you remember. So what was it chewing up, or what was chewing up?
Well, one thing that we started doing is we reevaluated our, we have a lot of in-house labor, right? Well, let's start there. So we were pretty, when I started the company, we were like cost plus 10%, and that's markup, not margin. Okay.
Correct. Wow.
So, and that's going to depend on where you're building and that kind of thing. And so then, we were like, okay, well, let's go to 12%. Let's go to 13%. And 13 is about where I was when we joined the Southern Living program. And now that's markup. And then, but once you take out all the things, because I started adding, I was trying to get health insurance, and I was trying to add all these benefits to retain employees, which I think you have to do, by the way. Like, if you want to retain good employees, you have to do those things or they're going to leave. But then we really started focusing on our pre-construction agreements. And I know that sounds crazy, but like we now bring in some income basically in pre-con.
Love it.
That goes to the bottom line, which is good. Our margin on our in-house labor. So instead of saying like, here's the at cost rate of this employee plus our contractor fee, we just came up with composite rates. So we just have like a 25% margin built into our in-house labor. And that varies, of course, depending on pay scales, but that's what we shoot for, is 20 to 25% margin on the in-house employee. That helped a lot. We started, we upped our design fees. Like, so we're drawing house plans. So we went up on that, started changing. Like, we even went from like heated square foot to covered square foot. Small change. That helped the bottom line. That was something that really caught my attention, to like, we weren't even really paying for the draftsman at that point. Before we changed it, it was like, well, I just need plans to build, but let's make money doing it. Right. What else? We started doing a lot of dirt work. That's one thing we brought in house, was a lot of the excavation. So we'll dig our own basements. We do our own lot clearing. We demo houses, and, being able to charge for that on the front end with our equipment and all that. And it's not that we're charging unfair rates, because we're not, but it's just more income, right? So it's ancillary stuff, I guess, is where this conversation is going.
Totally. Well, and that's what I was going to say so it sounds like, to insulate yourself to get up to that net profit that you were looking for, you started bringing in more, or adopting more service that you could sell.
Yeah, basically. That's right. Yep. We did. And And then depending on where we're building now, because now we're covering like southern middle Tennessee as well. Like our builder's fee has gone up.
Mm-hmm.
We have a spread now from like 15 to 20%, and several of those are now margin, not markup. So that
Wow.
helps push us, right. And then we've started playing with some project management, monthly stuff, monthly fees, depending on, again, how far the travel is for the job, because
Totally.
you have to recoup some of that. And,
Totally.
so it's just little things like I just struggled because I was like, man, you can't just say, okay, well, I'm cost plus whatever, 15%, but I'm just going to say, oh, well, I'm cost plus 20. Well, the customer you're talking to is probably going to walk out of your office. Right.
Right.
So trying to recoup things like general liability, which we were already doing, but I know builders that don't do that. Right. I mean, so that's a significant amount of money per project that you're losing
Damn.
if you're not collecting that back. So it's really easy just to add it into your contract or add it into your estimate or both. It's not like you're hiding it, but it's just a percentage. I think ours is like 0.085% is what we charge.
Okay.
So it's like what, 0.8% of 1% would be the
Yeah.
way to say that. So, but like recently I put together like a whatever $5 million proposal, and I think the GL fee alone was like almost 40 grand,
Yeah.
30,
Dude, that's
37
nuts.
grand. So you're going to lose that, right? I mean, so that kind of stuff, like we've strategized even on like delivery fees, like adding more numbers to our estimate for things like building cleanup,
Totally.
site work, labor, stuff that's just general labor for our in-house employees.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise they're just straight overhead. Like if you're not billing them out, right? And so that helped collect. So we just really tried to start paying attention to all the little things that we could do that we were already doing. We just weren't charging for. Right.
Well, and I think so. I'm not going to sidestep here, but I have a change order example that I want to explain.
Yep.
And I think ultimately, like what I'm hearing from this is you started bringing in more service. You started looking at what you were providing as an actual service.
Yep.
And that's where I start to say there are builders, and there's typically two lanes. It's like one lane is they're monetizing a hobby, right? Something they're massively passionate about. They love being bags on. They want to build a great product, but they don't necessarily view their business as a business. And
Yep.
then from there, it's like, it's either you're monetizing a hobby or you're running a business. And that's what I hear, like kind of that progression of you doing is you started evaluating your business of like, how do I generate more income? How do I provide more service in-house that I can generate income on and I can actually run a profit margin on? But I think the second piece, and this is where the change order example comes through, and I want you to correct me on this if you think it's bullshit.
Okay.
But when what you're explaining to me is you're looking at everything you're doing and you're marking it up respectively. Okay. And when I typically hear it with change orders is builders will lose on change orders because they don't mark them up appropriately. Typically they'll hang on to like a markup that's consistent with what was in the contract or whatever it might be, but they don't take into consideration all the administrative, all the expedited shipping, or what's going to happen if we just installed recessed can lights and we want to tear those out and we want to put something else in. Are we including all that demolition and labor and everything that has to go into it? And that's usually where they get scorched. It's not just we have to buy track lighting instead of recessed cans, right? Is that fair? Like you start to view it as how do I make money on what's going in?
And if I'm being honest, that's the next step for us right now. Like we're actually in the middle of evaluating how we handle that in our contracts and how we can charge for that. So, you have the ability to charge a change order fee, or you can charge a higher percentage. Like, let's just use numbers, for example, like if you're whatever cost plus 15% and then cost plus 20, let's just say, it's common for builders to then come in on a change order, and it's in their contract that change orders will be charged at cost plus, say, 30%, 35%. And that's money that you're losing. And I've got a really good friend in Florida that's doing that. And it's been amazing how much money, that they're bringing in from change orders. And because here's the thing, if you don't bring it in, you're really losing it. And that's what I think I'm realizing more and more now. Because it's like it's brain power, right? It's schedule delays, which means if you're not billing, you're not making money. So if you're delayed, you're losing money. So you're really losing it if you're not charging for that. And that's what we've been doing, if I'm being really honest. I've always struggled with like what's specifically a change order and what's really just a selection, right? Because I'm
Okay.
like, let's use your light example, track light, can light. Okay, let's just pretend like they selected can lights. And I know
Mhm.
the right answer is like, oh, if they've selected it, then that's a specification, then that's what they're doing. If they change the track lighting, then it's a change order. But let's just say we're still framing, right? Or maybe framing's wrapping up and they're like, hey, we've really been thinking about it. And we want to do the track lights instead of the can lights.
Mhm.
That's a hard spot as a builder, right? Is that a change order or is it really just them changing the selection? It doesn't impact you. I mean, what do you care, right? It's just buying this light versus that light. So that's part of the debate that we're in as a group right now. It's like that's a fine line of being like Captain Butthole here and saying, okay,
Right.
well, I'm going to charge you an extra $3,000, Charlie, because you changed your mind. Like
Right.
to me, if
Totally.
we installed the can lights and then it was like, hey, we want track lighting, then I think you're
Easy.
obviously in change order territory. But there's builders that treat it the first way. Like
For sure.
yeah, that exists.
Totally. But I think that even goes back to your comment earlier of like wanting to just not be the, just lack of a better term, like the money hungry builder,
Right.
right? Like you
Yeah.
actually do care. You wanted to build a brand, you wanted to focus on the build science.
Mm,
But even more so to your guys' conversation, because I think it's a great conversation. I candidly haven't heard it. And I think that, like, is there any logic to that decision making being and setting expectations with clients in
yeah.
pre-con of being like, look, if there is reasonable belief that the change you're suggesting or potentially suggest is going to throw off more than one to whatever X
Yeah.
else process, then it will be issued as a change order. Because I think that's where the cost happens, right? To
Mm-hmm.
your point, you have to finish on time. And if you've already got electricians lined up, they've already got material purchased, like they've got all this stuff going and it's like a week out.
Yeah.
And if changing from recess to track is going to be that big of a deal, rip them for a change order.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right on the money. I think there's got to be a good set of parameters or whatever where it's like, okay, if it delays us more than 2 days, 3 days, whatever that threshold needs to be.
Yeah,
If it causes a subcontractor to take work down, if it whatever, then that would have to meet it. So I think to me, you have to really identify that though in your contract because if not, it's just a gray area and you're going to get destroyed on it. Right.
totally.
So I think
Totally.
that's the difficult part. I mean, I also feel like with us doing design in house, like it's really our responsibility to get ahead of those things and like have design figured out before we need it and not, and really figure it out, not just concepts. And then you get to rough ends and everybody changes their mind. So, I mean,
Totally.
we're doing better and better and better at that. And I think that's one of the reasons I brought interior design in house. By the way, is because I wanted to be able to control that. That's a whole episode if you want to go there one day.
Yeah, totally. Well,
But
and I think so, like to this point, like I think this is great because I think like a lot of our conversation, it doesn't necessarily go around for builders adding in additional, we'll call it revenue streams,
mhm,
right? We're not adding in excavation. We're not adding in or thinking about project management as a revenue stream. My question to you is for the builder that doesn't want to do that, right? For the builder that doesn't want to increase their net income or their net profit,
mhm.
right? What can they do just to make sure that like I'm going to build this house and my goal is to hit 10 to 15% net on this thing?
Yeah.
What can they do just without adding in revenue to really stay on top of it?
So if you're not going to increase your volume, and you're not going to try to do additional streams of income like self-performing work or whatever it might be, it
Mhm.
really just comes down to your overhead and then what you're charging, right? So you're going to have to run a tight ship, right? You
Totally.
you may not, you may be the project manager, the salesperson, the warranty guy, and I don't know, maybe even the designer at that point. I mean, because that's a tough one. I think I was there for a while doing that, and I was miserable. So
Yeah,
I mean, hats off to you if that's the path you're on. But I think you're going to have to just learn to, um, you know, figure out how you can increase your contractor fee. And I tell you one thing that you can do. Just thinking as I'm talking, but if you don't know the difference between markup and margin, you need to,
hmm,
right? So there's a
love it.
difference, right? So
Totally.
um, and if for the sake of an easy conversation, like if you're charging 10% markup, you take the the cost of construction. So it's $100 of construction cost times that 1.1, right? So it's $110.
Hmm.
But if you wanted to do margin, you're going to take that $1, that $100, and you're going to divide it by 0.90, and then it's going to get you a higher. That's actually like really what you're making as income off of that contractor fee.
Okay.
And you're not changing your contractor fee. You're just calculating it on margin versus markup. And then, so like a 15% margin ends up being like a 17.5% markup. So,
Okay. So I think this is worth going into.
yeah, it's a
Because
big, it gets deep.
totally. Well, and I think that this is like where a lot of people go. And I'm certainly not a mathematician by any stretch of the example, but how I've always explained it, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really the way to look at markup is going to be I've got $1 million home and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
mark it up 20%. I'm going to sell it to the customer for 1.2.
Right.
That 200 grand, about 50% of that is going to be towards overhead, and about 50% of that should be towards your bottom line or your net profit.
Sure.
That's how I've just simply explained it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from like your math, and like this is where I've always got hung up on markup and margin is I understand the markup of your number times the 1.1 to get your markup number, but then the 0.9 divided by, or the number.
Right. You're dividing it instead of multiplying it. Right.
Right. Right.
So if it's a 10% margin, you take one and you subtract that 10, that, point one from it or whatever. And so then you end up with 0.9.
Sure.
And so then you just divide by that. And I know it's crazy, but I would encourage you to like literally get on ChatGPT, get on Google, and just like there's videos of like explain markup versus margin as a builder. There's thousands of videos. I had to clarify the language in my contract about it.
Mhm.
And what's interesting though is like it's very well received. It's not an uncommon way to calculate things in our industry, especially like in the commercial world. It's more accepted there, or more common there. It's accepted here too. But I would encourage everybody to educate themselves on that, because that's one thing I'll give Tom credit. So Tom's a retired builder. He's like the moderator for our Builder 10 group.
Okay.
And I remember he asked me like, "Hey, what do you charge?" I was like, 13%. He's like, "Markup or margin?" I'm like,
Oh.
13%. Like I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
and he's like, "You don't know the difference." I'm like, "I don't have a clue what you're talking about." And so, and then go around the horn and hear everybody else, and there was a mix of people that did markup versus margin, and then so it's one of those things. Like it can be. I find that a lot of times customers, they all get hung up on like what's the house cost per square foot, which if they ask you that in the first phone call, like they're probably not your customer. They're not my customer typically.
Yeah.
And then when they get down to the wire on builders, they want to just look at the percentage, right?
Totally.
They don't really look at that point. They're not even playing. So there is no cost estimate. They're just looking at, so it's not, I mean, it's a fine line, I guess, but I mean, we don't hide it. Like we're very clear with what it is, and they understand it. But, I think it's better received than going up to say 17.5% markup, and then instead of just running 50% margin. So that's
And
something
why do
that
you think it's received so well? Why do you like? And I think it makes sense. Where my
yeah,
head goes is like, I mean, if just for the average consumer, right? They're not building homes regularly. Of
right.
course, there are people that'll do multiple in a lifetime, but the majority, like that's just a one-time transaction for them. And I think most people look at this and they go, like, the business has to make money. Like, if I go and buy a shirt from Shields,
Mm-hmm.
do you know what Shields is? Are you
Mm-mm.
familiar with Shields?
No.
It's like a sporting goods store. We call it Cabela's, whatever.
Okay.
But like you assume that there's probably like a 30 to 50, maybe 60% markup on it. And like you just kind of like palate and digest that as the consumer, and you buy it and you move on.
Right.
Do you think that the consumer is like way okay talking about margin and like what you're actually going to be marking this thing up and making, because they assume that you have to make a living too and you have to make money? Because I think a lot of builders get scared of that, and they're like, I
Yeah.
think I'm
I
going to get
mean,
beat up over what I'm making and building this house.
and I think that I was never a fixed cost builder.
Mhm.
Okay. So I've
Okay.
always been cost plus. So it's always been a conversation with us.
Mhm.
Now, I've had to explain to people that we don't really make 15%, on that. Like that's not what I take home, right? I mean,
Right.
there's times that I have to explain that more than others to clients, but I mean, they get it, right? I mean, they know that. Here's the thing: if a customer doesn't value that and value what you're bringing to the table, then you're building for the wrong people. Like that's
Totally.
just straight up. If that's those clients are going to buy a spec home that's built to the lowest builder grade, cabinets and everything else in that house, and that's where you just build that dude as fast as you can, do your thing, and then just sell it on the MLS, like sell it with a real estate agent and move on. But if
Totally.
you're going to try to live in the custom world like we're doing, you've got to find clients that value what you bring to the table. I mean,
Totally.
if you're not going to, I don't think you can survive if you don't find those clients because they're going to destroy you. Like, and so
Totally.
they want you to make money because they want you to be successful and they want you to continue to deliver them a good house and bring ideas to the table and just take care of them. I think a lot of the clients that we build for, they just want trust that you're taking care of them, and they know that you have their best interest, and that's probably first and foremost with a lot of the clients we build for now.
Totally.
So
Totally. No, I think that's, I mean, just with this episode largely being about making money, right?
yeah,
Is it all starts with the customer or the
it
prospect at
does.
that point.
Yeah,
Like,
it
I think
does.
maybe like from an action item standpoint is like, I think probably like learning the right customer happens over time. Like
Yeah,
maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you might have to get burned by one or two to like really have conviction in those red flags.
yeah, yeah. That's a good way to go here. I mean, I think learning to say no is important. Just by the way,
Yeah.
if you never heard that before,
Yeah.
if you have that customer that's doing all the, because here's the thing, like I like to date customers before I marry them.
Totally.
Okay.
Totally.
That should be written like somewhere on a board in my office. Like we're going to date you before we marry you.
Yeah.
Because you can figure out in that pre-con, because you got to think if we're drawing plans and all that whole pre-con experience, that's 6 months minimum. In that time frame, dealing with them, delivering plans, getting feedback, welcoming them into your office, talking about their dogs, talking about whatever it is, you can figure out who they are. I
Yeah.
mean, and then you can decide in that if there's red flags, get out, right?
Done.
And we've done it. I mean, we've done it. We still do it. Um, learning to say no is probably one of the hardest things as a builder to really understand why you should do it.
Let's hear your script. How do you do it? How do you dump a customer?
Oh man, I've had it both ways. I've had it to where like it was kind of the ugly breakup, like I
Sure.
guess that's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we were doing a pre-con. So during our pre-construction agreement, so like we're drawing plans, we're designing your house, we're building your budget, your estimate with you, but also like if there's like a house to demo or trees to take down, like we self-perform that stuff. And so
Mhm.
we were going out to basically clear this lot, and I had told this guy, I mean, this is probably like a $2 million project, right? The
Yeah.
house. And he's like, I need to know exactly what it's going to cost before you go out there and clear this lot off so the surveyors can work. And I'm like, man, I mean, we're talking about a range. It's probably going to take us about 8 hours on the machine, whole day's worth of work for operator and a laborer, so whatever. You're talking $3,000-$4,000,
Hmm.
like maybe five. I said, it depends on what all we run into. We just don't know until we get in there. Dude, he like lost his mind. Like he just wanted to know like to the penny. And
Wow.
he called and got violent on the phone with me. And I said, let me
Always.
just stop you right there.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not your builder anymore.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things like the veins are like popping on your neck and your blood's boiling and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I probably shouldn't have said that. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I'm not your builder anymore. If you're
Yeah.
going to act like this before we even get started, I'm not your builder.
I'm out.
You need to find somebody else. And we packed up our crap and went home,
And
man.
got
And
out.
it was like, so that was like kind of an ugly breakup pre-con.
Yeah.
The other ones have been, we're too busy. Look, it's going to be like our schedule's gotten crazy. We've taken on more work. We had somebody leave the company. Like, I'm really sorry, but I think you'd be a better fit with this guy over here. And I'll try to make a recommendation. I mean, sometimes
Totally.
that's kind of
Totally.
like probably,
Yeah.
I'm sure those guys appreciate the send off, but and sometimes we have to break up with them because we don't have time. Right. I
Yeah.
mean, I
Yeah.
really, it's not a profitable enough job. It's too far away, and it's just not a good fit for us. And so we
Yeah.
have to just have that conversation. And it just depends, man. Sometimes you can kind of like, I hate to say price your way out of it, but I mean, it's one of those, like, if that's where you need to do it, where it's like, okay, if we're going to take this project, it's going to be good for the company. If
Mm-hmm.
it's not a good fit for the company at this margin, then sorry. And so sometimes those things take care of themselves.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I would say it's case by case, but I
Totally.
definitely, I've had a big range of breakups.
Of course.
So
I
yeah,
so
it's
I
tough though.
Of course, it's not, and yeah, certainly not to be suggested it's easy, but that is, I'm not your builder. That is what I hear like most commonly in the
Mhm.
rough breakup.
Yeah.
Like we had another episode with, I think it was Scott Bland. It might have just been a conversation I was having with Scott. He's a builder down in Waco. And the same thing. He was like, got the plans on the desk. Gal walked in the office. If I'm remembering correctly, it was like
Mhm.
barking orders. Scott started getting red flags, and
Yep.
he just rolled up the plans, handed it back to her, and said, "I'm not your builder.
Mhm.
Like, you got to go find someone else." And they're always kind of like dumbfounded because they got called out
Yeah.
finally. But to insulate yourself, and what I think you said, which is the most important, the business, those conversations have to be had,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about profitability. How do you make money on jobs? It's like, you cannot
Yeah.
set yourself up at the beginning of a project trying to make money with that
Yeah.
type of customer.
Yeah, and let me throw this in there too. So I guess I'm just thinking about the listeners that are, I guess, somewhat new in their business. They're trying to figure out how to make money and
Mm-hmm.
not waste their time, because if you're wasting time, you're losing money.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first started, I was not doing pre-construction agreements.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was just like, you come in, we could talk 47 times. You could just keep coming back and we'd talk some more, and then I'd price it, and then I'd price it again, then I'd price it again. And next thing you know, you've been dating this guy, whatever, 10 months, 12 months. And then they're like, oh yeah, we can't afford that. We're out.
Brutal.
And so that happened to me time and time again. And then I remember, I forget who it was. It might have actually been Jake Bruton, somebody I was talking to. I can't remember. They were like, oh yeah, you got to charge a pre-construction agreement. And I was like, what the crap is that? And
Yeah.
they're like, oh yeah, you just got to get a deposit from them. And then if they walk away, then you keep their money.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bull crap, like, how can you do that? Like, and so I remember I've like found this agreement, like, it's pretty short. Like I think it's a 1 pager, maybe 2 pager. And it basically just says that, like, this deposit is going to cover these services. And it's like, client meetings up to so many hours. It's going to cover, your estimate. It's going to cover any site meetings with professionals like surveyors, blah, 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 blah. And then associated with that, is this the amount of deposit? And then mine has a line that says, within 12 months, if we start your house within 12 months, we'll give you X% of it back as a credit. And I remember, man, that first time I asked somebody for $2,500, like, I was nervous as crap.
2,500
I
bucks.
remember, man, I was like, oh man, I'm like, I'm trying to get through this sales meeting. And I'm like and they're like, what's the next steps? And I remember, like, well, we've got this agreement that we signed next, So, and they were like, okay, yeah, no problem. And then it's like, we'll do a checkbook. And it was like, well, here you go. We'll do it today. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, that was easy,
And you're
and
like,
then,
I just saved so much heartache just by
yeah,
asking.
yeah. And then, at the time I was like, okay, well, I'll give like 90% of it back if I start your house, like, or maybe 100%, like, if I forget what it was. And now it's progressed. And now we're like
Yeah.
minimum 10,000 and we give half of it back,
Yeah.
and it's just enough to where it's like people, they commit, and if they won't sign it, they won't give you a check, then they're not serious, and
Totally.
so, and honestly, you would be surprised about the people that have paid it, spent time with us in a meeting or two, maybe they even paid for plans. That's a separate agreement, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, hey man, we bought a house, like, we're not going to build anymore. Never even asked for their money back. But contractually, they can't get it back. I mean,
Right.
whatever. I'm a nice guy. I'm not, if I, understand the situation, I obviously make exceptions sometimes, but that helps make money because you're not wasting your time. It goes to the bottom dollar. Even if you build their house, you still collect a portion of that, to your income. So
Totally.
if you're not doing PCAs, start. Like, that's like
PCA
number one.
pre-construction agreement.
Yes. Like that. Absolutely start that today. If you need one, email me. I'll send you my template. I mean, that's like 100%. Like you have to start doing pre-construction agreements.
Beautiful, dude. I think so. And like, I think even like how you explain like the pre-construction agreement and then the plans was like a separate agreement,
Yeah.
like a separate fee.
Yeah.
But I think that's like probably one of the biggest takeaways with like kind of the umbrella theme of this episode being like how to make money, how
Yeah.
to even just start, but also like how do you insulate yourself at the beginning?
Mhm.
Last question here. And if you're like, Reece, this is a whole other episode, that's fine. But when I hear pre-construction agreement, I'm hearing service, planning, site walks, prep, stuff like that. More like service
Yeah.
level fees. Then do you like once everything's good, plans are there, like everything's locked in, we're going to break ground. Then do you go in for another deposit?
Oh
Because I
yeah.
hear that with
Yeah.
like material and getting subs landed and all that
We
stuff.
do. Yeah. Yeah. So advance payment is part of our
Okay.
construction contract is what we call that, or AP. And it's a similar deal. So we get it, when you execute our contract and you then have to then pay us an advance payment, we hold that money ourselves, and we use it to stay cash positive, right? Because we're buying material, we're paying subcontractors, and then we bill out our customers kind of in reverse. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then also like once they sign like an acceptance letter at the end, there's like I think 75% of that gets applied to their account. And then the remainder we hold for an additional, I think, 45 days. And just to catch like straggling bills that come in, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's been, if you're having cash flow problems, start that too, because, or even if you're not doing it, start it, because people, again, good customers that are serious, they're going to do it. Even if you just get $10,000, like that still helps
It
a
makes
lot.
logical sense. Like as
Yeah.
a consumer, I'm not a builder, right? I'm in
Right.
software. Like if I'm like, yeah, build my house, and I'm like, I know I need a hole dug in the ground and a foundation poured in it.
Yep.
I wouldn't even cross my mind to
Hmm.
suggest that the builder's going to front load that cost.
Yeah. And it's one of those, I think what you have to look at is um, your cycle, right, on your AR, right? So like how often are you invoicing your customers? And you don't want to let yourself get too far behind, right? And because if you haven't had a customer not pay you yet, you will. Give it
Mm-hmm.
time. It's coming. And it could
Mm-hmm.
be because they're trying to be a turd. It could be
Mm-hmm.
because they're out of cash and they're waiting on this other account to sell, or they're trying to sell some stocks, or they're trying to, there's always a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you have advance payments from people, right? And not just one, 7, 8, 9 jobs, however many jobs you got going, you got this pile of deposits. You can withstand a little bit of a storm from people, like when they get hung up.
Totally.
Good, bad, or ugly, right? It doesn't matter why they're hung up. They're hung up. They can't pay you this month for whatever reason. It eliminates that panic of like, oh my gosh, like how are we going to make payroll, or how are we going to? So and then too, if they're really going to be bad customers and try to skip out on paying you, you've got this deposit, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you get the goal is to not let yourself get behind that deposit. So if you got $100,000 from somebody, don't let their account get past that. Bill
Love it.
often, bill often. Don't let things just, don't be so busy at the end you forget to bill, and then all of a sudden find yourself sending them $180,000 invoice and praying
Dude.
they make that payment, right? Like that will absolutely bury you if they can't. And also too, I find that customers like always were like, oh man, I forgot about that. Like, whoo, man, that makes me feel so much better, because now like I was stressing, like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So that's always part of it. But I mean, if I actually had a good friend of mine tell me, if you're building like for cash customers, it's probably even more important to get an advance payment. And I
Yeah.
didn't understand that when he first said it, but after we talked, it made sense. He had a guy that was, very wealthy client, cash pay. Basically at the end was like, yeah, I'm not going to pay you. Like, I'm not happy with that, like sue me if you want
Dude.
to. And it was like this total flex. And he like filed a lien on him, but it didn't matter. Everything was like, there was no financing involved. So he had no leverage. Right. And so he's like, it really hurt him bad. And so he realized then, he's like, okay, I have to start protecting myself.
Dude.
And so, yeah, this just also don't ever let yourself get in a bind like that if you can prevent it, you know?
The ways that contractors can lose absurd amounts of money is sickening.
It is. It's every
It's
step of the
sickening.
way.
I
Yeah.
literally was on the phone with another contractor, one of our clients, 1,000 miles away from you, told me the same story
Hmm.
about forgetting to bill the customer 180 grand, I think, or
Yeah.
150 grand, something crazy.
Yep.
And he was like, part of it was the project manager's fault, part of it was our fault. But he was like, I had to go
Yeah.
back to the customer and I asked for half.
Yep.
Right. And you're like, but dude, that's coming out of the bottom line. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it's like we're talking like 10% annual profit bleed. That
Yeah.
is nuts.
Nuts.
And,
Nuts.
and you just start to think about it. You're like, you don't have to have those experiences, right? I mean, it's almost like, how many badges of honor do people have to get for the rest of the community to know that you
Yeah.
don't have to do that, right?
And
Like that's like the
it,
difference between success in a business and failing, right?
and like, I get it, right? I mean, it's easy to get lost in the weeds of this business. Like, it's
Mhm.
easy as a builder. You get focused, like, especially in your first 5, 10 years, like, you're just trying to survive. You're trying to get the next sale. You're trying to figure out why Miss Sally's mad about, her sheetrock finish or something like that. You're just stuck in the weeds and you're not paying attention to your accounting system. You're not tracking expenses. You don't have a even just you don't have a good organized system. Like, I mean, I was very fortunate. Like, so my father-in-law helped me get off the ground, not from a financial standpoint, but from just the organization standpoint. Like,
Love it.
he was helping run an engineering company that he was at,
Mhm.
and so he had a really good understanding of, like, file management, even,
Totally.
and even QuickBooks. Really, he helped me get all that off the ground. We kind of like set our roots in CoConstruct. We set our roots in Google Drive, and we set our roots in QuickBooks Online. And so, but I can understand if you don't have those systems. I mean, you're still the guy who's got stuff stuck in folders, and like,
Totally.
you don't have anybody in your office helping you. Like, you're gonna forget about invoices, and then, maybe that concrete guy forgot to ask you about it, and the next thing you know, you've closed this job out. And he said, "Hey, man, when am I going to get paid for that?"
Yeah,
And then you realize that you didn't pay him 70 grand. Like, I
dude.
hear those stories, man. It's mind blowing. Um,
It's insane.
yeah,
We
yeah, it's a lot.
we
It's
have
wild.
It's wild, dude. We have I've probably told this story a half a dozen times. I need to get a new story just because of the podcast. But hand on the Bible, we have one of our her name's Chloe Brown, Wildest Dreams Consulting. And I always give Chloe shit for this because like she's like a chief operating officer, chief financial officer. She's just like wicked smart when it comes to processes and accounting. But the point being is she has a blog with us and it's going over one of her clients. They exposed over $5 million in unbilled cost over the life of a business
Oh my gosh.
in which the owner was confident they were just like making great money, doing great
Wow.
work. And it's like, but then you think about it, it's like, okay, like this is like a 20-year-old business or however old they are. And you start to compound 70, 80, 100K,
Yeah.
right? Like 500,000 on a bad year, big volume year, and you don't have the processes in place and
Yep.
cost is slipping, jobs get closed, bills come up. Like,
Yep.
dude, it's nuts.
It is.
And
It
it and
is.
then that's where it goes back and like, are you monetizing a hobby or are you running a business?
Yeah.
And I like as brash as that is, it's the truth. It's like when you really get excited about understanding the percentages that go in hand with this and the mistakes that you can prevent with solid process,
Hmm.
solid teams, solid understanding, contracts. We talked a lot about contracts. That's where it gets fun.
Yep.
And it's not always like I'm going to net $1 million this year because I'm going to
Yeah.
go and I'm going to be a millionaire. It's like, dude, you could net 1 million and go hire the 2 employees that you drastically need.
Yep.
Or you could invest in consulting or
Yep.
advertising or a new office, right? Or equipment, a fleet of trucks, whatever, right?
Yep.
The stuff that you need to continue elevating your business.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's all good stuff, man. I mean, I've just been focused on trying to grow. I've been grow mode since I started, and I'm still there. I mean, I
yeah.
still like to have bigger plans. There's been years where, we've taken a loss, but it's because we've added more employees, we bought more vehicles. We're getting ready. Like, we're just trying to
Yep.
keep going. And, um, I don't know. I would just encourage anybody that's like in my shoes. Maybe they're before me, maybe they're after me in experience, but um, find a find a group of people to plug into. Right? It you have to if
Mm-hmm.
you're going to grow. First of all, I like that. If you're not growing, you're dying. Right? I
Totally.
had a really good friend who passed away back in the fall who was a killer builder, and he told me that, and it's like just stuck in my brain. If you're not growing, you're dying. But find a peer group, right? And even if
Yes.
you're not that social person, get over yourself. Find you some guys. What I've always like thought to be fascinating about this industry is that when you get involved with a group of builders, they want nothing more than to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're passionate about it. They all want to help each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about the guy down the street, right? Your
Right.
competition, but get out of your market, go to the trade shows, join the NAHB and get in the Builder 20 group, or you don't have to be Southern Living, but there's other groups out there, and just ask for help, man. People want to help
Totally.
you. People want to help you. Ask Reece, hey man, who's somebody I can talk to, because
Totally.
you don't have to reinvent the wheel, man. People will give it to you. You just have to ask, and you got to get your systems in place, or you're going to forget to bill out your client. What'd you
Totally.
say? $7 million over the life of your business. I mean, don't be that guy.
It hurts, and it doesn't have to be that way, right? I
Right?
hear it, and it's usually guys are like, "Oh, it's just a cost of doing business." Well, it's just a lesson that I learned. It's like, well, you
Yeah,
don't have to.
yeah,
And to your point, is like when you've got these networks, whether it's Southern Living, whether it's a Builder 20 group, whether it's a piece of software you use, like
yeah.
Adaptive.
True.
We talk to contractors for a living,
Yep.
coast to coast, border to border. Everyone is on our list. So it's
Yeah.
one of those things where it's like if you've got those interests, you've got those curiosities,
Yeah.
there's a ton of avenues you can take.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the end
Yeah.
of the day, it's about making money. It's about building a quality product while making money. While making money.
Oh man, building experiences is what we say.
That's right.
Yep.
Exactly. Well, this was a killer episode. I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you for
Absolutely.
coming on. And I wish you the best with all
Thanks,
your
man.
growth.
I appreciate it.